48 Everblaze. Where did you get this? Sophie asked, not sure if she could feel excited or terrified. Mostly, she felt confused, especially when Keith told her, I found it in my cape pocket this morning. No idea how it got there. You didn't get one? She checked her pockets to make sure, surprised at how disappointed she was when they were empty. She felt even worse when she read the Black Swan's message. Careful plans have now been changed. So a meeting must be arranged. In 3 days' time, when the evening star ascends, find us where the lost have no end. They want to meet you, Sophie mumbled, reading the message again to be sure. I know, they're finally including me on the team. Hope they know this means their little rule book just went out the window and the first change I'll be implementing is clearest thinking directions. An idea where the lost have no end? Probably the wandering woods by my tree. They've let me notes there before. And the evening star ascends. Right after sunset, Sophie finished. Cool. The party with the Black Swan in 3 days. Bring your dancing shoes, Foster, and maybe try to look a little less miserable than you do right now, because it's a serious bummer. Come on, this is good news. Is it? She asked. How do you know it's not a trap? I don't, Kif admitted. But even if it is, remember, last time we met with them, you got your abilities fixed, and that forkle dude gave you some answers. And then we almost died, she reminded him. Details, details, he laughed when she didn't smile. I'm kidding, Foster. I do realize it's a risk, but I think it's worth it, especially since they want us to meet in the Wonderling Woods. I mean, how bad could that be? Well, for one thing, they only gave a note to you, not me. Don't you find that suspicious? That is weird, Kif admitted. When was the last time you checked the cave? Not since we realized they had a leak. Then maybe there's a note there waiting for you. That would make sense if you think about it. Sandor's got so many security things around here. The cave is probably the closest they can get. Maybe. Gee, try to sound less excited. Actually, never mind. Get your shoes on. We're going to the cave and get ready for an epic I told you so when we find your note waiting. Kif kept true to his word, and his I told you so was so loud it was still echoing around them as Sophie unrolled a tiny scroll. Her note showed the same instructions, but it also included an extra verse. The days ahead will be dark at door. You must not fear yourself or your power. Not cool, I didn't get a present with mine. Kif complained as he unhooked a familiar black Magsidian swan charm from where it had been latched through the paper. Magsidian was a rare mineral only the dwarfs could mine, and it had the ability to affect certain forces depending on how it had been cut. The last time they'd used the charm, it had steered the needle of Sophie's compass toward the Black Swan's hideout. She had no idea what they'd need it for this time, but that was the list of her worries at the moment. Do you really think we should trust him? She whispered, glancing over her shoulder like she expected a fleet of dwarfs to pop out of the sand. You most definitely should not, Sander interrupted to neither of their surprise. Sophie was honestly shocked he'd kept quiet as long as he had. Other than a few squeaky sighs, he hadn't even argued about them going down to the caves, but he was back in full-fledged, overprotective bodyguard mode as he added, They've already proven that they cannot ensure your protection. I will not let you blindly follow these instructions. But they gave us 3 days to prepare, Kip reminded him, and they told us where we're going. I'm betting they knew you were going to freak out about this, so now you can do whatever obsessive safety stuff you want to do first. Sander couldn't argue with that logic, but he still mumbled, I do not like it. I don't either, Sophie admitted. I mean, why reach out to us now, after all these weeks of silence? I don't know, you did just tick off the Ogre King and almost start a war, Kif said with a sneer. Maybe they decided you shouldn't be left on to your own devices. Sander released another squeaky sigh. That almost makes sense. Of course it does, Kip told him. Next thing Sophie knew, Sander and Kip were coming up with a plan. She tried to listen, but mostly she kept rereading the Black Swan's note, wondering if they knew something she didn't. One line in particular stood out from the others. The days ahead will be dark and dark. Despite the Black Swan's prediction, nothing dark or dark happened during the next 3 days. Sander haunted Sophie's every mood, even though all she did was organize more trunks of wedding decorations in Edeline's office, finding nothing useful, interesting, or related to the Black Swan in any of them, and hang out in her room. Dex was too busy working on the ability to restrict her to visit, but he hailed her every night and didn't even freak out too much when she told him about the meeting with the Black Swan. He did, of course, ask if he could go, but Sophie told him the same thing she told Fitz and Bianna. She couldn't risk scaring the Black Swan away. Bianna tried to convince Sophie that she could sneak along as a vanisher, but since she couldn't stay invisible for longer than a few minutes, she had to admit she couldn't handle it. She stopped coming over as of then so she could practice vanishing with Della, which worked out well because Fitz wanted to work with Sophie on triggering her memories. He'd stop by every afternoon to test new trust exercises, but nothing seemed to work. Even when he had her stand on a chair and fall backward into his arms, he did catch her without even bruising her, but all it earned them was some serious teasing from Keith, who'd showed up just in time to find Fitz cradling her. Kip spent the rest of the day begging for a turn and promising he'd only drop her once. It was frustrating and discouraging, but somehow comforting at the same time. Like life had found a path back to normal, despite school being cancelled and news of the counselor or nominations trickling in. Most of the nominees Sophie had never heard of, but she was surprised to hear Dame Alina's name in the mix. Do you think she'll win? Sophie asked Grady when she finally caught him at breakfast on the third morning. With all noble assignments on hold during the mourning period, Grady had been working long hours in Eternalia, helping the gnomes organize their cleanup project. Apparently, they were saving all the shards of jewels to build a monument to Kenric's legacy, which Sophie knew was an awesome idea. But she wasn't sure she could bear saying it when it was finished. Alden seems to think Dame Alina has several supporters, Grady said, serving Sophie a huge slice of the purple pork root pie Edeline had conjured up before heading out to work in the pastures. Why? Are you afraid of losing your principal? Actually, Dame Alina was Sophie's top pick. She'd been extra kind and supportive at Foxfire lately, and she always sided with Alden. Having her on the council would guarantee her another vote in Sophie's favor. Sophie took a bite of her breakfast, relieved when it tasted like bacon mixed with more bacon and covered in melting cheese. Gnomes really did grow the best tasting vegetables, though she had yet to discover a pizza flavored one. How long do you think it's going to take the council to come to a decision? She asked between mouthfuls. Oh, I think they'll elect someone as soon as the nomination period has ended. Not only is King Dimitar waiting on your punishment, he cleared his throat, but our world needs to know we have our leader settled again. People need to feel safe. And speaking of safe, he scooted closer, taking her hand. Just because we haven't talked about this meeting with the Black Swan tonight doesn't mean I'm totally okay with it. So, you don't think I should go? Sophie asked, still having doubts herself. Actually, I think we need to find out what the Black Swan wants, but I don't trust them, and I definitely don't trust the Neverseen, so I'm going to insist that Sander go with you. And not just the Wonderling Woods, anywhere they take you. None of the drugging you and taking you somewhere alone stuff like last time. They might not allow that, Sophie warned him. Last time, they wouldn't let Kif go with me. I can be much more persuasive than Mr. Sensen, Sandler said, patting his weapon-filled pockets, and if they refuse, I shall drag the two of you home immediately. But this is not up for debate, Grady interrupted. You are not to go anywhere without your bodyguard, and that applies to everything for right now. If Sandler's not with, you don't go. Understood? Not until things settle down. Fine, Sophie mumbled. She knew a losing fight when she saw it. Plus, she had a feeling she knew what things Grady meant. She'd caught Fitz and Kif whispering about an Excel Sophie Foster campaign that apparently had a ton of supporters. And she'd heard Kif put it, the Lost Cities were not a Foster-friendly place at the moment. She pushed aside her plate, no longer feeling hungry. Grady pushed it back and added 2 pink folded pastries. That's another thing. I know you're under a lot of stress, but you still need to eat and sleep and do things with your friends that don't involve conspiracies or rebels or testing your abilities. Childhood is a precious gift, Sophie. Don't let anything steal it away. Sophie nibbled on one of the pastries, which tasted like crepes soaked in butter and sugar. It's not really my choice, is it? Yes, it is. I wish I could give you a world where everything was perfect and shining and safe. I used to think that's what we had, but he shook his head. I've realized now that our world doesn't define us, we define our world. And I hope you'll fill yours with as much light and happiness as you can. You realize how silly that sounds, right? I do, but after everything that's happened, I think we could all use a bit more silly in our lives. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and all too soon the sun was setting and Sophie was bundled in a thick black cape and heading to the lip master, hopeful she was doing the right thing. Of course, Grady and Edeline were waiting for her. She braced for a long lecture and an even longer list of rules and warnings. All they did was hug her. Really? That's it? Sophie asked as they called the crystal for the Wonderling Woods. Why? Adeline asked. Because I'm going off to a dark, lonely forest to meet with a group of rebels, one of whom might be a traitor. We trust you, Adeline promised, and we trust Sandor. Grady added. Sandor pounded his burly chest, which was now strapped with two rather terrifying daggers. Shit next to his sword was an obscurer and a melder, one of the rare elven weapons. Sophie kept hoping she'd never have to see again. Nothing will get past me, he promised. Sophie nodded, but she couldn't help remembering the way King Dimitar had tossed him aside like a piece of trash. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to, Grady told her quietly. Yes, I do. She repeated the words in her mind until her legs felt strong enough to move. Then she took Sandor's hand, glad she had someone to hold on to, and let the light carry her to the Black Swan.